I didn't know there was a reason the police were looking for that car when I pulled over to help. It was around 11:30 on a Sunday night, and I was driving home on a stretch of highway I had used hundreds of times before. There wasn't much traffic that late. Every few minutes, another car would pass in the opposite direction. But otherwise, the road was almost completely empty. About 20 minutes from home, I noticed a sedan pulled onto the shoulder. Its hazard lights were flashing. There was someone standing beside the driver's door. I slowed down as I passed it, then looked in the rearview mirror. I kept driving for maybe another 100 yards before I started feeling guilty. It was cold, the road was empty, and the car looked like it had been there for a while. I pulled over. The man standing beside the sedan started walking toward me before I'd even gotten out of my car. He looked to be in his 40s, wearing a dark jacket and jeans, with no coat despite the temperature. I lowered my window just enough to ask if he needed help. He explained that his car had stopped running and his phone had almost no battery left. He said he had already called someone, but they weren't going to arrive for another hour. I remember thinking that wasn't unusual. I asked if he wanted me to call roadside assistance for him. He said someone was already coming. That should have been the end of it, but then he asked if I could give him a ride to a gas station. I looked at his car. The driver's door was still open. There were no tools on the ground, no jumper cables, and nothing that suggested he had actually tried to figure out what was wrong. I told him I couldn't take him because I was already late getting home. He nodded and stepped away from my window. I started rolling it back up. Then he asked if I could at least help him move the car farther onto the shoulder. I don't know why I agreed. Maybe because it was a Sunday night and I didn't want to leave someone stranded. Maybe because nothing about him seemed particularly threatening. I got out and walked toward his car. That's when I noticed the rear passenger door was slightly open. I asked if someone else was inside. He immediately closed it. He said the door had probably come loose. I remember staring at him for a second. Then he smiled and apologized. I should have left right there. Instead, I walked around to the front of the car. The hood was cold, not cool. Cold. The engine hadn't been running for a long time. I asked him when the car had stopped. He gave me a time. I looked at my dashboard. The car had apparently broken down almost 2 hours earlier, but the hazard lights were still flashing. I didn't understand how the battery could still be working after that long. He told me the battery was new, and I shrugged it off. Then I noticed something on the passenger seat. A child's backpack. It was small, blue, with a cartoon character printed on the front. I asked him if he had a child with him. He looked at the backpack, then at me. He said it belonged to his niece. There was something about the way he answered that bothered me, not the answer itself. The fact that he didn't seem surprised I'd noticed it. I stepped away from the car and told him I couldn't help move it. He didn't argue. He simply said that was fine. I walked back toward my car. That's when I heard the rear passenger door open again. I turned around. The man was standing beside the sedan. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking inside the back seat. I couldn't see what he was doing. Then he shut the door. I got into my car and locked it. The man remained beside his vehicle. I started the engine. As I pulled away, I checked my mirror. He was standing in the middle of the shoulder, watching me leave. I remember feeling stupid. I'd stopped for 10 minutes. Nothing had actually happened. I drove another 5 miles before I saw flashing lights ahead. A police cruiser was parked on the shoulder. An officer was standing outside. I slowed down. He motioned for me to pull over. I assumed there had been an accident. Instead, he asked whether I'd stopped for a broken-down sedan a few miles back. I said yes. He asked me to describe the driver. I did. The officer became quiet. Then he asked whether I had seen anyone else in the vehicle. I told him about the backpack. He asked what color it was. I said blue. He wrote something down. Then he asked whether the rear passenger door had been open when I arrived. I said it had. He looked at me for a few seconds before asking me to stay in my car. Another police vehicle arrived about 5 minutes later. I didn't know what was happening. Eventually, the first officer came back and explained that the sedan had been reported stolen earlier that evening. The owner had been found injured at a rest stop about 40 miles away. They believed the person driving the car had been involved. Then the officer asked me something I still think about. He asked whether the man had ever stepped completely away from the car. I told him yes. He asked whether I had seen his hands. I said yes. Then he asked whether I'd noticed anything unusual about them. I hadn't. The officer told me they had found blood inside the sedan. Not much, but enough. The blue backpack belonged to a little girl who had been reported missing that same afternoon. She wasn't in the car. They never found her that night. The man I had spoken to was arrested the next morning after police tracked the stolen vehicle. But there was something else. Something the police didn't tell me until several weeks later. The reason the officer had stopped me that night wasn't because they had already identified the sedan. It was because another driver had called 911 after seeing me pull over beside it. That driver had followed me for several miles. They thought I was being forced to stop. And according to the police, the man beside the sedan had never actually asked me to help move the car. He had been trying to get me to stand beside the rear passenger door. They believed someone was hiding inside. They found evidence that another person had been in the back seat, but they never found out who. The little girl was eventually found alive 3 days later, about 60 miles from where I had stopped. She had been left with someone who apparently had nothing to do with the original kidnapping. The man who had stopped me was charged with several crimes. I never learned exactly what he intended to do with me. Maybe he wanted my car. Maybe he wanted me inside that sedan. Maybe he simply needed another person to disappear that night. I don't know. What I do know is that I still drive that highway. And whenever I see a car sitting alone on the shoulder with its hazard lights flashing, I don't slow down anymore. I call the police. I keep driving and I never look back.